That should do it. They should start to populate now.
Yeah, it's popular.
All righty, we got some attendees coming in. Welcome to the Marcus Hour. We'll be starting any moment now. Which this one is a Q&A session where we got pre-sent questions. And we encourage any additional questions throughout the segment. So let's just go ahead and get started as we see more attendees come in. Again, everyone, thank you for joining. This is our post July 4th Marcus Hour. This one is our 6th episode of the Marcus Hour. And for this one, as I just mentioned, we're making it a Q&A, question and answer format, where there were some pre-submitted questions that we're going to go over in the PowerPoint. And I will just start the PowerPoint right now so we can get going. Start PowerPoint. So we're going to, slideshow, sorry. So we're going to get going on this. Again, yeah, everyone, thank you for joining. This is the 6th episode of the Marcus Hour, and what we're going to be going over today is just general questions, hot topics in community associations. We're gonna get into some really exciting and new developments that we've been seeing and that we're kind of excited to share with all of you and our kind of thoughts on that. We encourage if you do have questions during the show, feel free to submit them. I believe we should be able to see them pop in. And as you submit questions, we might not get to it today, but we want to make sure that we will answer them either in the next week or so. I'm here joined by Stephen Marcus, famous condominium attorney. Anything you want to add, Stephen, before we get started into the presentation?
No, I'm ready to go whenever you are, Jake.
All right, let's get going. Explain the law of water leaks in condominium units.
You want me to take this one, Jake?
You can, yeah, I think you got this one.
Okay, so this is a short but loaded question. There's a saying that if they build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. I think with water, the quote is, if they build it, it will leak. Water leaks are problematic in various areas, and it opens up questions such as insurance, allocation of insurance deductibles. But the first thing I suppose would start at is the beginning. The association transitions from developer control. There have been water leaks from time to time. When the engineer does the condition study for the now unit owner controlled board, they want to see what is the cause of the water, what's the cure. On Carlisle, another manufacturer, rubber roofs, there are 20-year warranties. The developer or the subs may have some obligations. And then you go to post-transition, and inevitably something happens. I'm picturing like a 10-story high-rise or mid-rise that something happens and water infiltrates into the condominium unit, let's say from the roof area. Again, you have to fix the association has to fix the common area. So whether it's the roof or the windows or the flashing that are causing it, that has to be looked at. But we're in a horrific weather pattern right now, and I think 115 million people in the United States are in areas with rains and floods and all that. And the point is, just because a roof leaks doesn't mean that the association is responsible. There's no strict liability. The association is only responsible if there were negligence. But if a roof leaks and causes damage to the unit below, the associate, if it were $100,000 of damage, the association would notify the master insurer. The unit owner would notify its HO6 carrier. The unit owner should have coverage A in an amount of at least the amount of the deductible. And what's happening these days, because of the number of water claims, is insurers have gone from say $5,000 deductible per occurrence to $5,000 deductible, or $25,000 or $50,000 per unit on water claims, because they were getting destroyed with ice dams and water damage. The other issue where it comes up is somebody's water heater lets go. Ideally, it would have like a there are ducts that there are little gizmos that give you a warning that a water heater might be leaking, or you could put a copper pin or some kind of metal pin under the water heater. But the problem is, if you're on the 10th floor, there could be substantial damage to the 9 stories below. Each unit could have a claim, and again, the process, and it's fine to call us if this isn't sinking in the first time, because it seems like it has to be repeated a lot as each claim comes up, is to put the master insurer on notice for amounts above the deductibles. Tell unit owners to notify their HO6 carrier, and hopefully they'll have coverage A, or they should get coverage A, and the association would allocate each unit's owner's percentage of the loss to that unit. So among the 9 units damaged, the loss would be allocated based on how much damage there was actually to each unit. On water infiltration from the basement, with climate change, or for whatever reasons, water levels are increasing, and water tables are increasing, and water is more prevalent. But if there is an issue with water coming in, infiltrating the basement, under the state sanitary code and the state building code, the building has to be free of water infiltration. Sometimes some pumps are used, sometimes a inside French drain system is created, where there's a channel around the perimeter and it all goes into a sump pump, which pumps the water out, is not acceptable to say that water coming into a unit is not something that the association shouldn't deal with. The association should deal with that. And the other problem is after 72 hours, water standing in a spot, you get concerns now with the possibility of mold, and mold is typically only covered up to 15,000 of damage per annual insurance year, and is covered zero on commercial general liability and directors and officers liability. So I think that's all I wanted to say. And again, I understand it's tricky as each claim comes in, but it's more complicated than water comes in from the outside. It's from the outside. The association must take care of it. That's not how any of this works. And then the insurance makes it even more complicated. And then claims history, if you have a lot of losses, makes it also complicated because there's a chance of cancellation of the policy. Jake?
Excellent. And again, yeah, this is just a general Q&A, so feel free to submit questions if you have any. So the next question is, in Massachusetts, can an HOA board vote via email or by electronic means? In Massachusetts, it's not statutorily identified. Now, in Florida, where I also practice, under statute 718.128, it allows electronic voting if a unit owner consents. So you can opt in. You also don't have to opt in. It's not required. And I think the statute has this correct. And I think states will kind of go towards this kind of electronic voting or virtual meetings more and more in light of the recent pandemic, where virtual means was more accessible and more popular. And I think it has it right where they're not going to require you to electronically vote, but you can do it if you want. And I think boards and property managers should consider putting this in the governing documents and allow for the option of electronic voting. We're seeing technology just boom even more and more every day. Things are more and more automated. It's easier to access people. Even here today, we don't have to go to the local convention center to host our Marcus Hour. We can do it right from a webinar.
Jake, sorry for bothering you, but this is important. Do you think that the 21 attendees would fit into the convention center?
I think it'd be a tight squeeze. We might have to rent out Gillette Stadium or Fenway Park to make sure we can fit everyone.
There were people lining up outside our offices at 3:00 this morning. So
I heard, yeah, they were lining up for that. We had a more popular attendance than the Drake concert at TD Bank North Garden earlier this week, where people were lining up at 3 a.m. or Sheshetskyville for the Duke UNC fans. They have to line up weeks before to make sure they can get in.
Or the mess with Taylor Swift and the tickets, and it costing $3,000 for a nosebleed seat.
I think that's what we'll start to charge for these Marcus hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. Good thing that we can, stream this online. The internet's a great place to get things going. And I do think in associations and condo voting and virtual meetings, especially where associations have difficulty conducting an annual meeting, if you can do it by virtual means. I think in New Hampshire, I don't practice there, so I'm not going to speak on it, but there's something about the requirements of virtual meetings versus in-person meetings.
And I think in Massachusetts, there's that the CAI Legislative Action Committee, which Matt Gaines at MEB co-chairs. I believe they that CAI, so the national nonprofit with the offices in Wellesley for condominiums. I believe we have filed a bill last session and probably refiled it this session for remote voting elections, et cetera.
Yeah. And I do think it's growing and it's going to be heading in that direction. And I think a lot of associations should allow what Florida allows under 718.128, which allows you to opt in. So you don't have to do it if you're used to the in-person or virtual or regular pamphlet voting. You can still do that. And there's no issue with that. I also think electronic voting, there are a few vendors that we are familiar with. One is called ONR, another is called Get Quorum, which as you can tell from the name, it relates directly to associations and making sure that you can get your quorum. And sometimes allowing for ease of voting, ease of virtual meetings, that can get you to get votes to be effective. And I think, yeah, we're actually gonna, I think it's either in October or November, we're gonna do a webinar with, I believe, one of those vendors, and kind of get into the details of how technology is affecting associations. And you're seeing it every day. Chat GPT, whatever Google's Chat GPT is, Twitter, Elon Musk is going to make that crazy. Mark Zuckerberg is going to fight him, and he's going to do Instagram threads. So you're just going to see a technology more and more prevalent in communities. But for purposes of Massachusetts and electronic voting or virtual meetings, I would suggest adding some language in your governing documents to allow a unit owner to opt in if they would like, but not have to or require electronic voting.
And maybe to finalize it, the most Massachusetts condominium documents state that if all board members consent, that you can do business without a meeting, but you need 100% of the board to approve. So look through your documents or have your attorney give you an opinion as to how voting should be replaced. And then the final warning is be real protective of email and the discovery. People seem to say crazy things by email, like, oh, gee, this unit owner who's complaining about this is a jerk, blah, blah, blah. Typically, they're doing it on their work email or a personal one. I guess my suggestion is anything that you type in an email, assume that it, or think about that what if what you said would appear on the 6 p.m. or 11 p.m. news, and be a little more cautious in terms of what you write, because if there is a suit, the other party is likely to discover it and use it against you. The other suggestion is that each association should get its own email address for the trustees, board members, and try to keep all communications through the association's email. I suppose it also could be through the management companies.
And to take it a step further, you mentioned that can be found through discovery. We're going to get into records requests during this seminar. It can also be revealed during records request. Make sure your email, what we would suggest and what we suggest to associations is to make a consolidated email. Don't use your personal email for association dealings. That applies to property managers and associations, or boards, I should say. Let's get to the next one though.
Okay, and
This is you. What are the best?
yeah, I'll do this. I have and a question came in on the Q&A, so maybe you can, I didn't have time to look at it, so I'll start answering. You can read what think about whatever the question that was just asked.
And if we don't get to your, we encourage you to submit questions during the seminar. If we don't get to it during this hour, we will answer it. We'll try to get it within the next week or so. But so we encourage submitting questions if you haven't already. And just do it right in the chat feature, Q&A feature at the top of your screen.
We save that, and then we attempt to answer each question post webinar if we don't get to it. So we're on to what seems like a simple question about what are the best practices in regards to a master key system, agreement to pool, keys in the event of emergency. And the person who asked it is a unit owner in a condominium in Boston. I don't think on the board, but he suggested to the owners that they create such a system, and that he would it would be kept in a safe, but a third party would have the list of what unit each key was for. And the simple answer is on Mass General Laws, Chapter 183A, Section 4. The association is permitted access to units. But recently, you probably read about the case with the tragic case of the two surgeons in Boston who were murdered in their penthouse condominium. And at least so far in the case, it looks like there's some heavy and potential liability for a judgment or settlement by the association and the security companies, and for what I think but don't know will be very significant amounts, or it will go to trial in April of 2021. So with that, my concern is, okay, so somebody has the keys, and that saves the fire department from breaking down the door of the unit. What if the person who has the keys isn't home? What if the person who has the keys in the safe is home, but the person with the safe is home, but the person who has the combination to the safe isn't, and then somebody who knows the code? So it could very well happen that there could be a breach of security if somebody simply opened up the safe and there were 100 keys, each labeled by the unit number. So I think associations have to come up with the best answer, but not these days. They have to balance safety and the deaths of the murder of these two doctors with the convenience of a key system. Years ago, my answer would be, oh, absolutely, you're entitled to have copies of the keys. And now I'm leaning more towards, maybe it's safer to take the chances. And if the fire department has to put an axe through the door, then that's what they have to do, and the unit owner has to pay to replace it. Jake?
Good. In Massachusetts, what are the responsibilities of the Board of Trustees to make repairs? In this case, a roof replacement, when it is unclear how many unit owners approve of the repairs. Could the board be held liable if they do not make the repairs? In this one, the short answer is yes. They need to make the repairs. For roof repairs, this is something that is very important and needs to be done. This isn't considered an alteration or an improvement that would need to be voted on, or that is for the is a little less serious than a roof repair. If they need to be made, they need to be made, and the board has that ability to do so, and they should. In light of Surfside in the Surfside incident, which is a neighborhood in Miami-Dade, Florida, the Champlain Towers South, there was a building collapse, and the need to make repairs is becoming a lot more important. Actually, statutory requirements across the nation are being put into effect that require not only that repairs be made when needed, and we will get to some of that a bit with reserve accounts and needing to maintain the property in a good condition, and a lot of things that have come out of some legislation across the nation based on Surfside. The big thing there that you need to focus on is ensuring the structural integrity of some of these buildings, and that includes roofs. You don't want a damaged roof. It's something that is more important than just if you're adding a tennis court or changing some exterior areas for the benefit of association members. The biggest thing you want to do here, the roof is a common element, common area in most cases. And so you as the association and the board are going to want to emphasize and make sure that these are made in a good and safe manner. So yes, the short answer, this is an important area, statutorily required, beyond even just roof repairs. In most legislation will basically be saying if it affects the structural integrity, it's going to be needed. And we'll get into reserve accounts. That's also something that I can imagine will be more strict and more stringent about the requirements going forward. And yeah, unfortunately, June 21st, 2021 is when Surfside collapse occurred. There is a lot that has been done. There is a lot that still needs to be done, and will continue to occur in our communities and in the community association world at large. So, good question there. So.
Okay, I'm going to try to rattle off a couple on the chat. First question is, for a few $100 of delinquent charges, should a board take multiple actions with substantial legal fees? How do you stop it? Well, the first thing to stop it is in any disputes with the condominium association, the amounts that are alleged to be owed should be paid, but the back of the check should be endorsed paid under protest, to reserve your rights. That will stop further actions. But condominium boards and managers also have to look at, gee, if we're chasing $100 worth of fines, how do we justify $10,000 worth of legal services and multiple actions? So I think there just has to be some common sense approach to dealing with that. There's a question about some condos charge hundreds of dollars, several $100 for move in and move out. What is the maximum? I don't think there's a maximum that a court has imposed, but I think what a court would look at is what is the cost for, assuming that you also have a security deposit for damage by the movers, what is a reasonable cost for the administration of putting one of the elevators out of service because it's being used by the person moving, and you could have, for example, a $50 charge, a $100 charge, and a $500 security deposit that you get back when the move out is done if there's no damage. Thoughts on rent to own agreements? If it's done during the developer stage, there's also protections under the Massachusetts Condominium Conversion Act, Chapter 527 of the Act of 1983. I'm not seeing it a lot with unit owners doing it with their current tenants, and there are the things that should be included is attached should be a purchase and sale. All the terms should be held out. The date for acting on the rent to own should be set forth, etc. That question was from Brian Teague, so we're happy to speak about it more on the 22nd. But I didn't answer my question, which is how can the unit owners demand? Next slide, I think, Jake.
Oh, good.
How can the unit owners demand that the board be transparent and conduct the condominium business in open sessions that owners can hear all discussions? In Massachusetts, there is no open meeting laws for condominium associations. Jake is probably going to tell you that there might be in Florida. Notwithstanding that, we strongly encourage that meetings be open, sort of like Board of Selectmen meetings, where probably a half hour before or after with questions and answers and comments, and then you listen like you would at a Board of Selectmen meeting. We think it provides transparency and gives more trust. We also believe in getting minutes of meetings to all unit owners after a meeting or on the portal. But in Massachusetts, it's not required. We suggest that there are exceptions such as executive session for example, legal strategy discussions with attorneys. Jake, you want to talk about Florida for a minute?
Yeah, so section 718.1122C, the Florida statute, that actually, yeah, it does provide that at meetings at which a quorum has been obtained, must be open to all unit owners. And then the statute also goes on to state that unit owners have the right to record or videotape meetings, which I know a lot of times in Florida, especially if it's a contentious board or contentious kind of community, we encourage that not only to bring an attorney to kind of to hold the peace, but maybe even security if it has gotten hostile or to the point of physical altercations. And yeah, again, I think this could be a good clause to mimic if you do want open meetings in your at your association, a good clause to mimic in your governing documents. Okay, so I'll get to the next slide. This is you again.
Okay, if in our association in Rhode Island, we have a unit that is not part of the declaration, but is owned by the association, can we engage in a 99-year lease for this unit? My understanding from the specific question is that it was being used as a superintendent's unit. We've had the same thing with condominiums in Massachusetts, where a former in-house unit for the superintendent was not part of the units. This is just going to be a broad answer because we really can't answer it without reviewing what your condominium documents say. But in our opinion, it would seem that it would be possible to rent it on a 99-year lease or engage in a 99-year lease, do it from time to time. I would probably put in the agreement, just because the Rhode Island courts have surprised us with a few decisions. I probably would put in it that if it's deemed to be illegal, that the arrangement will cease and the occupant will move out of the space. But it would seem to me that it would be economically wasteful to have something that sounds like a condominium unit but isn't, sitting there unoccupied, when we have so many issues with housing for both affordable and market value, and getting more on the market. So that's my quick answer.
And for Rhode Island questions, neither my father and I are licensed to practice in Rhode Island, but we do have Edmund Allcock, who is the managing partner of Allcock and Marcus, who can he grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And if you need any questions about Rhode Island specifically, he's the man. Okay, this one is a great question. How do you recommend enforcing fines as it relates to pets? And if you like the dog in the photo, he is actually a dog of our family called Digby Marcus. So he is actually the brains and brawn behind the Marcus Hour, and we're glad to have him join us today. Hello, Digby. So to get into pets, this will normally be delineated in your governing documents. This is something that the policy or enforcement should be provided in your actual governing documents, and how you want to handle the handling of pets. That being said, you need to be careful with emotional support or service animals. Check your jurisdiction as to what it says the ADA requirements are, and make sure you comply with those, and that you do not restrict service animals if you prohibit pets in your community. I want to get it. This relates to fines in particular. So enforcing fines, there's a case called Trustees of 10 Porter, and that gets into all types of things, everything you'd want to know as to the reasonableness of fines, not only as it relates to interpreting that from the standpoint of, was this a reasonable fine based on the violation? Is this an appropriate fine to just fine them in general? And also the amount of the fine. In that case, it had to do with cameras that were set up outside of units or able to view certain common areas. In that case, I think it was the amount of the fines ends up accumulating after each day that it happens and it's not removed. But the amount in that, I think, of the fine per se, was the amount from $50 was considered oppressive, and it should have been a $10 fine. As it relates to pets, if someone is bringing a pet in every day, you'd have to kind of look at the violation and consider what you want to do. Maybe a warning would be the right way to go the first time. If you see the pet again, it's almost like the airplanes. Emotional support animals were being allowed until it was abused. People were bringing emotional support peacocks onto airplanes, akin to associations. You may want to make sure that the pets are tamed and appropriate at the community. A lot of associations will say in their governing documents, for both owners and tenants, they'll only allow small dogs, up to 25 pounds or something of that nature. That's a completely reasonable enforcement of pets. But yeah, you kind of want to get into the details and speak with an attorney as you want, as it relates to fines and anything of that nature. As it relates to dog, usually dogs are being walked, but I guess you could walk a cat or emotional support peacock or whatever. Dog waste, you can, this is actually a developing topic. And we recently read an article on this within our firm. Basically that associations can hire an expert to pay for DNA tests to prove who is the owner of the pet. And I don't know what the enforcement would be. You obviously can't sue the pet directly, but that's up to you as a community, in all seriousness, whether you'd want to pay for that. I mean, it seems like a little excessive, but if it's becoming a flagrant issue in communities, there is that option to pay for DNA testing. So thanks, Digby, for joining us.
So the final warning is, so from a long time ago, probably 30 years ago, a Georgia appeals court judge in a ruling on a pet case in a condominium said, "I'm sick and tired of rich people suing over their pets." And so in the Porter case, let's say you had 2 indoor cats. A California court found, after many appeals, found that it was perfectly fine to enforce against 2 indoor cats that never left the unit. But to me, it seems a little crazy. At $50 a day, that's $1,500 a month or $18,000 a year in fines. Judges would rather see you take legal action to enforce versus just continuing to fine, which does not do anything relating to the pet. And the final issue that Jake hit on was the fact that the Porter decision just looked at $50 a day and said that it was unreasonable, so they upheld what the trial court had ruled on. And also emotional support animals could be an exception. So talk to your attorney whenever a pet case comes up, because pets will quickly become emotional support animals where the size doesn't matter, the weight restrictions don't matter, the pet restriction doesn't matter. And the cases, at least in Massachusetts, end up with discrimination cases at the Mass Commission Against Discrimination, so be careful.
Yeah, definitely. All right, next one.
This is me, Jake, or you?
This is you.
Okay, and short-term rentals, CAI has a policy that's fairly new, but they've been discussing it for the last year or two, which is basically federal government and state government, leave us alone, let us self-govern, let us decide whether we want short-term rentals or don't want short-term rentals. There was a Colorado case, CAI, we filed an amicus brief on that basically made only condominiums had to be short-term rentals, and the court threw that out, which is a good result. But whether you want to be, if you're in like a resort area and you want short-term rentals, or if you're in a area where you want longer term rentals, you don't want transients, you don't want Airbnb, that there should be some self-determination by the board as to what you are and not a governmental mandate.
Yeah, and yeah, getting into transient properties. Yeah, that and condotels, which condotels are popular in Florida. Short-term transient unit owners. we've been kind of looking at some lending requirements. And sometimes you can be precluded from lending if you kind of are deemed a condotel or have transient residence. So something to keep in mind. Next question. This is also okay, so the question is, what are the best practices as it pertains to electric vehicles? With the carbon footprint, and people kind of moving to electric vehicles for either, carbon footprint or just price of gas being out of control. This is a growing trend. And again, as Stephen mentioned, as it related to short-term rentals, that CAI has a public policy on this as well. Again, there's a push for these. It's not going away. It's going to only increase over time. The best practices as it relates to these is twofold, and twofold as basically for now, but there could be other layers depending on your association, if it's a townhome versus single family, if it's a one building complex. This could definitely vary in the number of parking spaces, if it's a garage, all types of issues as it relates to that could end up being more nuanced to your particular set of factors. But the best practices generally as it relates to EVs is you're going to want to decide, because if you don't have them already, the number of stations you should have in place. You should figure out, either it may even be worth bringing in someone to do a parking study, on how many they project, or just do a little bit of research, voting, whatever, and figure out how many stations that you want to allocate towards EV charging stations. And you want to, again, if you have a small kind of garage or whatever, parking area, you still want to account for the growing number of these EV vehicles. So putting one in may be good for now, but the trend is moving at a rapid pace. So it's something that you definitely want to keep in mind and think about. And again, the next factor as it relates to electric vehicles and parking, is how do you charge, not literally charge the vehicles, but how do you charge the unit owners in the association? And the best way to do this is equitably to the owners who benefit. That's probably the best practice. Figuring that out, again, you want to figure out how many EVs there are, who's going to be using it, how often are they using it. If it's 3 of 10 unit owners that are using the EVs and need a charging station, they should be the ones that are charged cost. And this is something that, there is legislation going on across the nation as it relates to right to charge laws. And in some associations, it's already being put in place. In Florida, always ahead of the curve, always seems to be at the top of the statutory requirement in Florida, and they have an EV law that this is a required, or not required, but encouraged to include a number of stations, equitably charge the owners, and this is important to address now with your board, your owners, the property manager, figure out what you want to do with charging stations and EVs.
Or also keep in mind that one of your roles is to preserve and enhance values of communities. And I know that there's a lot of things that condominium documents say, you can't do this, you can't do that. The answer is, we used to say probably in the 1990s, these cable companies shouldn't be coming in here and putting in cable, whereas these days, or these antennas for wireless, there are some things such as charging stations that it would be put you at a disadvantage not to have what every apartment building and probably every other condominium has, which are charging stations of some sort. And I don't care how the costs are paid, but to rule out people with electric vehicles is crazy. A side note is, I heard this in passing, is that electric vehicles weigh a whole lot more than regular vehicles. I'm not sure what that means, but I suppose you should talk to your engineers about it. But keep up with the technology. Do not ban electric vehicles just because the documents say you can ban them.
Yep, staying ahead of the curve in a lot of these topics is important, and I would suggest addressing it now, if you have not already. You're up.
Rules enforcement. How should associations respond? There's one thing that with condominium associations has sort of been eliminated that work to some degree in a lot of single family subdivisions without covenants. And that is, if you had a problem, you talk to your neighbor. These days, nobody wants to talk to the neighbor. The association takes care of that. We pay this manager and these boards all this money a month. Let them deal with it. They then report whatever the issue is to the manager and the board. The board says, well, we don't want to deal with this. We're volunteers. Let's send it to the attorney. And I can tell you, guaranteed, that for a first violation, let's say it's of somebody who just moved into the community, doesn't know anything about the rules and regulations, and does something to violate them. What would you think their impression of the association and its board and management company are if the first letter they get is a certified letter from an attorney telling them to cease and desist from certain conduct, unless it's of an emergent nature? But if it were a parking issue, a pet issue, start with the easy way. Consider a due process hearing after that, where the unit owner has the right to have an attorney, to be heard by the board, and to have the board render a decision, and then take it from there. But don't be the association that causes the advertisements we see from time to time, where association boards are made fun of for being too serious about not allowing anything. Whereas Jake sent me a meme yesterday, hopefully I'll remember it, but it said, I got a letter from my condominium association. So instead of just doing what they suggested, which made perfect sense, instead I spent the next 5 hours reading word for word the condominium documents. And then I spent the next 2 days going around the 200 unit complex to find as many violations as I could by other unit owners. Everybody has to chill a little bit on rules and whatever, and make things civil again. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I would like it to.
Yeah, unfortunately, things became a little more contentious in communities over the pandemic. I think people had nothing better to do than complain with their fellow neighbors. So we hope to bring civility back. And yeah, even though we practice law and we deal with disputes all the time, we encourage trying to work it out, play a game of pickleball with your neighbor rather than fight them.
except now that's a problem because communities in towns are getting complaints from people saying that pickleball, the sound is too much because it's more than a tennis ball or whatever.
Yeah,
So sometimes you just can't win. I heard yesterday that pickleball was invented in like 1962. I did not know about it until the pandemic.
yeah,
People were sending me from across the country, are sending me pickleball rules. And I said, "Oh, what the hell is this?"
fastest growing sport in the world.
Also, huge injuries, and not surprisingly, in the 60 plus range, because apparently it's advertised as something that anybody who still has a breath can go out on a pickleball court and just start playing. And apparently it's fraught with injuries because there is building up to this kind of stuff and stretching and other things that people don't think about because they're told this is a game that anybody can do, sort of like checkers,
Or shuffleboard.
shuffleboard.
All right, next question. How do you recommend budgeting to include a reserve fund pursuant to ensure adequate reserves? This is a very hot topic, as I mentioned earlier, with roof repairs and legislation going on in different jurisdictions. Basically, yeah, reserve requirements are gonna become a big thing in community associations. You're gonna be required to, this is my kind of speculation. Most jurisdictions are gonna require certain reserve accounts, certain reserve studies be performed. And this is an important topic again, pursuant to or based on what happened in Surfside. Florida, Senate Bill 4D. This requires reserves, and this is a hard deadline for Florida and a big issue in communities there that associations are grappling with. By the end of 2024, there is certain structural inspection requirements as well as reserve account, reserve study requirements. Other states will likely follow suit, maybe not as arduous, but in the foreseeable future, we could see this becoming a bigger factor, and not only and the reason I say adequate reserves on this slide is Florida, Massachusetts general laws, section 183A, section 10I, is very vague as it comes to reserves. The wording is association shall maintain adequate reserves. What does adequate mean? A lot more vague than what Florida is going to require and have a certain amount affixed to the associations. Best thing I would recommend doing now, even if Massachusetts has not changed their verbiage or your jurisdiction has not changed their verbiage, the recommendation would be best practices. Make sure you're complying with the statutory requirements. That's number one. Again, that should be just, point blank what you should be doing, but going above and beyond, conduct a reserve study. Get a company like Reserve Advisors. We had Mitch Frumpkin on previously, and he also does reserve studies throughout the nation. Conduct a reserve study, get it done, see where you're at, see what your projections should be, and kind of go from there. Implement a reserve account with proper funding. This is important. This is, again, adequate reserves. It's a term of art rather than science. Get proper funding. Make sure you are adequately reserved and have a backup plan. Have a rainy day fund. Consult with expert engineers, architects, and the likes. This is just to, again, reserve studies go hand in hand. Reserve accounts go hand in hand with structural inspections, especially according to the recent legislation in Florida. Consult with an expert engineer, architect, what have you, to see how you're doing and on your property. Again, hand in hand with that, periodic site reviews just to see where you're at, see what needs to be done, see what expenses need to be made now, see what needs to be made in the next few years, see what needs to be made in 5 years, 10 years. Get these preventive measures and maintenance out of the way. The biggest thing is it seems like a rainy day fund, and you may say to yourself, why are you dealing with something down the road? It's like the green banana theory. You even if you're like, everyone has a different time horizon, how long they envision being at a community. Everyone should be focused on making sure this is complied with, because it's going to be important whether you're living there today or 20 years from now. Just make sure you get it done. Make sure you're doing the reserve studies. Make sure you're complying with the law. Big hot topic in our world right now.
And it looks like as of 2 days ago, it looks like Fannie Mae is going from a temporary to permanent on the lender questionnaires and questions about the structural integrity of the building. So things are going to get tougher before they get easier. Jake, if I could answer a final question, it was actually in chat, but it was asked a couple of times, I believe by the same person. The first one was reasonable management fee to produce a 6D certificate. I don't know. There are managers charging $10, $50, but the tricky part is that usually it's not just a 6D certificate. They're also asking for the condominium documents, the insurance policy, for the manager to fill out a lender questionnaire that then has to be reviewed by the association's attorney. If we're only a 6D certificate, the law says in Massachusetts you can charge a reasonable cost for the certificate, stating if there aren't any unpaid common charges. But typically it's these bundle of documents that lenders more and more need, and a fee of $250 for the condominium documents, the time on the lender questionnaire, and then legal fees for an attorney to review the questionnaire to keep the association out of trouble. Things have gotten much more complex. So I know, I don't know the facts, but so that's a broad brush answer that I don't know how much it should be charged for a 6D certificate. The other question is how long to fix something within a unit, or something in the common areas. I think it would be whatever a reasonable time would be. And if it's not done, you could go into court. You could go into small claims court, or you could go and get a injunction to require the board to do it, or to say that you'll undertake the repair and reduce it from common areas. You'd want a judge to say that, because that's not typical, but those questions would require more than an hour of time to discuss, but I wanted to hit it since it seemed to be asked in a couple of different ways, and it ties into a question on unit owners requesting a lot of documentation dating back 30 years to when the condominium was formed. Do we have to provide all this? The law in that Massachusetts is that the association has to maintain records for 7 years, but it is not typically a reasonable request to ask for every record over a period of 7 years. The associations can charge a photocopying fee, and there's a good likelihood that they could charge a administrative fee for the time they spend with the unit owner who's going through the records. I think we're past that time. So as Jake said, we're gonna answer, if Jake stays both the chat and the Q&A, we're gonna answer all the questions that we didn't get to, and other questions from the PowerPoint slide, and we'll send you the PowerPoint slide and those answers most likely sometime next week.
Let's get into one top. We're just gonna discuss one topic briefly. And this has to do, two questions that came in. One, explain what condominium private property means as it relates to OSHA, FHA, ADA compliance. We have issues with painting of bright yellow on stairs, safety posts, sewer drains. Yeah, and do the rules apply differently for townhouse versus garden style? Stephen, do you want to take this?
Well, I have ADHD. I was wondering, what'd you say?
Do you want to take this one?
Well, no, what was tell me, what's the question?
It's explain what condominium private property means in
Yeah.
terms of adhering to OSHA, FHA, other government entities. Because there's someone at the property and a board member who is insisting on painting everything bright yellow or bright colors. The safety posts, stair edges, sewer drains.
All right. Okay, there's a couple of things that I took from that question. Well, one was that they were saying that the fire department was requiring that the area where the fire lane was be painted fire lane. I would double check to make sure that the fire chief requested that, but or that they're gonna do it. But I would think it would be foolish to, if it's verified that the fire department wants the fire lane clearly marked so it can get to people in the event of an emergency, that you want to comply with what they say, because what if you don't and the ambulance and fire trucks cannot get to a clear area because you didn't meet their requirements. On the other requirements, keep in mind that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not the government. So their guidelines are only guidelines if you want to, for banks that want to sell loans to them. So when you read something that's, well, Fannie Mae requires this or that, there are things such as the 10% set aside for reserves that just makes perfect sense, but those are not mandates. In terms of OSHA and other fire suppression systems and things like that, those likely are mandated. The Fair Housing Amendments Act that added protections for the disabled and for and based on age are protected as to familial status and handicap, but also the Housing for Older the Persons Act of 1955 has Housing for Older of 1995 holds out for requirements for a 55 and older community. So on anything that somebody's saying, oh gee, I have to paint everything yellow, maybe it's somebody from Coldplay, Chris Martin, I'd be very suspect of that. That just sounds like somebody saying, well gee, the answer is squat down and walk around like a chicken. Make sure that what is being cited for you to do really exists as a obligation, and once you determine that it is required, if it's not mandatory, or speak to your attorney to see whether it is, do it. If nobody has any citation saying that everything has to be painted yellow, then you don't do it, but it seems like one owner or one board member is saying this. And what I didn't read was that anybody checked it out to see if these requirements were real. And I'd go to the extra step, because this is serious, of having the association's counsel, speaking to the association's counsel to see what you're required to do and what you aren't required to do and which of these laws apply to you. And again, as I said, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not the government. They just have guidelines if you want your loans for sales and refinances in your association to be bought by them.
All righty.
Okay, we're way past that time, Jake.
Yeah, thanks
Good.
everyone for joining. Again, it's our first presentation past July 4th, so kind of been a busy month, summer, dog days of summer. We do want to tease our next presentations coming up. Popular topics coming up soon that we kind of touched on a bit today, but we'll get way more in depth. August, Japanese knotweed and invasive species. This is a very hot topic. You may not even know what Japanese knotweed is. You will know a lot about it in August if you come to our presentation. September, security on the premises. We touched on the Fields case in Boston. We're going to touch on it a lot more in September. Come here in September, Stephen's birthday month. October, my birthday month, electric vehicles and parking. Again, we talked about it a little bit today. We're gonna absolutely get into every detail that you would want to know under the sun in October, as it relates to associations. So we look forward to seeing you then, and have a good weekend. And thank you for attending.
And I'd also say that if you have topics that you would like to have us address as a main topic for a particular month, let us know. My email and Jake's email is there, and would like to hear as to this is our 6-1. Are these webinars helpful, not helpful? Are they too basic? Are they too advanced? And to get how are we doing? And you can be brutally honest. But thank you for joining. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, Jake, is everybody gone?
Yep.
Okay, maybe stop the recording.
Yeah, I'm trying to hold on. Oh, here we go. Stop recording.